it's Marae Regal, and you're tuned into The Mo Show, where I aspire to inspire your mind, body, and soul. And we're just going to jump right into it today because it's the end of 2023, and I have my 2023 book review. I read a lot of books this year, so we're going to just jump right into it. In 2020, starting in March, I read a book, one book a month. So then the next year, I made a goal to read 12 books. So in 2021, I read 12 books that year. And then 2022, I said I'll read 18. I read 18 easily. So then 2023, I was like, I'll just up it one more. And my goal was 19. But I actually read 21 books this year. So I was 3 books ahead of schedule on my Goodreads app. If you don't have Goodreads and you're a reader, I would suggest you get that app. So, like I said, I read 21 books this year, and they're all sitting right here. We're going to go ahead and jump in and get started. I'm using my app to help me see like what I rated the books and my comments on them. The first book I read was Feeding the Soul by Tabitha Brown. To know her is to love her. If you know, you know. If you like her, then you're generally going to like her books, like her, content, things that she says. If you don't like her, then you probably won't like this book. It tells a little bit about her background. It says, finding our way to joy, love, and freedom. So it talks a little bit about where she's from and how she grew up. I love autobiographies, but also gives some like helpful tips and tools. And I think she's what I've seen of her, I don't clearly know her, but a genuine spirit. So I read this. This was my first book of 2023. I would recommend. The next book I read was another autobiography, Taraji P. Henson. And I tell you, this lady can act. Like, I think she is in like top 5 GOAT women actresses. For real, for real. Like, she's so versatile and she can play any role. Taraji, that's an actress. That's an HBCU educated actress for you, okay? That's my girl. And as you know, as it's coming out, I read this at the beginning, so in probably January I read this book. But as you know now, The Color Purple's out, and it's December and all that, and so it's a lot going on around if she's going to be acting or not because of the pay and all that stuff. But Taraji is a great actress. I really, really love her acting. So another autobiography, Around the Way Girl. It was good. It was juicy. I appreciate a good tell me your real life story. The third book I read now, y'all gonna see a lot of Colleen Hoover books I read this year. When I started the year, I was really, really, really into Colleen Hoover, and I read about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 or 10 Colleen Hoover books this year. Next year, I doubt I'll read that many. I don't know. It just kind of gets repetitive. But this is, remind you, in like January or February. So when I read this book, this is my top 2 of books by her. I'll tell you the other one, but this is my top 2 of books. This was really like, ooh, it really was like a scandal. It was something unexpected. I read that. I finished that in March, so I must have started that late February. 10 out of 10 would recommend. I also read It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I think I borrowed that from someone, so I don't have it. But I read that in February. That was good. It Ends With Us was it's a sequel, or it's the sequel, but the first book in the sequel to It Ends With Us, and then it starts with us. But this was really good. Actually, yeah, that's Regretting You, It Ends With Us, and then there's one more I'll tell you about. Those are my probably top 3 favorite. The rest are like, come on, girl. But anyways, read them all. My next book would be In Every Mirror She's Black. I actually got this as a Christmas gift from my sister last year. And so I read that book. I finished that book in April. It was okay. I gave it a 3 out of 5. It just wasn't what I was expecting. And it has like 3 different women. It's following 3 different women's stories. And maybe I just didn't read enough into it to know that that's what it was going to be. But it was okay. 3 out of 5 stars. And then I read Women Leading Well. I got this from a conference I went to. I went to the Jackie Hill Perry conference that actually was here, and I got a few books from that conference from Christian women, or just Christian leaders. And I lead a Bible study, so I definitely wanted to read up on this. I gave this book 5 stars. I finished that on April 29th. Okay, so I did that pretty quick. The next book I read was Ratchid DeMic. I got this from a DEI conference or meeting I was in. I am a DEI rep at my school building, so this was, to me, important to read. Again, not really what I expected. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, so it was okay. I think it's important to read, but to me, it was just okay. The next book I read was Colleen Hoover again, November 9th. I gave this 2 stars because the plot of the story, I mean, you can obviously read it on the back or read about it, but I just felt like it was just so unrealistic. I didn't appreciate that. Like, these are easy reads. Colleen Hoover books, like, they get you in there. They're easy reads, but I was starting to figure out, like, I finished this book in end of May. They're like, the plots are kind of similar, so, or just unrealistic to me. So yeah, I gave that 2 stars. Surprise, surprise. Then I read another Colleen Hoover book, and I finished this book on June 8th. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. The only thing that it was lacking 1 star was just kind of like the realistic of like, how would this happen in the real world? But otherwise, it was a good story, a good message. I just don't think it was realistic. Then I read Some Places More Than Others by Renee Watson. I got put on to Renee Watson, I want to say last year. I got it's a book she has called Love is Revolution. I got that at a Juneteenth celebration or something. And so I was like, ooh, I really like her writing style. It's kind of like YA, young adult. So it just really has to be your type of book. It was an easy read. It was a fun read. I gave this book 5 stars. And she has a lot of other books, so I'm going to be getting more of her books too. But they're easy reads. Good stories that you could see being movies. I appreciate that. I finished that book on June 13th. Then I read Miss Garcel, Miss Fancy, Miss Beauvais, Miss Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Now, I'm going to say, I gave this book 2 stars. I finished this book on July 2nd. Gave it 2 stars. I was disappointed. Like, and everybody else was saying it's her book called, it's her memoir, the autobiography, Love Me As I Am. It just didn't tell me a lot. It was kind of boring. Like, it just wasn't a lot of stuff going on there. And then I was telling people about it. They're like, yeah, Garcel's not really interesting. I was like, I thought she was. So this shocked me in not a good way, but 2 out of 5 stars. And then I read Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover again. I finished that book on July 19th, and I gave it 2 stars. I think it just had to do, again, like I said, with the plot and it just being unrealistic. Clearly, I didn't learn my lesson, because after 10 Colleen Hoover books this year, they're easy reads and it's fine when I read it, but if I'm rating it as far as like being a good book with a good realistic story, no. I'm trying to figure out. Oh yeah, it was just a lot of like them just keep having sex. I just did not have time to. It just was too much. It was just too much. Every time you turn around, people was having sex. Then I read, when this book came out, I was so happy, Sisterhood Heels by Dr. Joy Harden Bradford, who is the founder and the creator of Therapy for Black Girls. She is a psychologist, and she's a doctor. So I listened to her Therapy for Black Girls podcast, some of their topics and stuff. I finished this book on August 16th, and I gave it 5 stars. This was really good, talking about sisterhood and friendships, and it helped me to really reflect on my friendships and the kind of friend I'm being and the kind of friend and sister that I want to be. So 10 out of 10 would recommend this book. Then I read It Starts With Us, which is the sequel to It Ends With Us, but this is the second book, and It Ends With Us. I read It Ends With Us at the beginning of the year. Then on August 29th, I finished this book, gave it 5 stars. Those 2 books, like I said, it starts with us, it ends with us. I really, really like the story. And some people were like, we didn't need a sequel. I appreciated getting this information about like what kind of continued on with their life, like what happened after. So I gave that 5 stars. Then I read In His Image, 10 Ways God Calls Us to Reflect His Character. Again, I got this book at a conference. As you can see, it's pretty small. I finished that on September 11th. I gave it 4 stars. I don't know why I didn't give it 5, but it must have been have some small thing missing. But it was an easy read. Easy read too. Then I read Maybe Someday. I gave it 3 stars. Finished it on September 29th. It is... Oh, okay. Okay. This has a sequel too. I think it has 2 sequels. Maybe Someday, maybe something else, and then Maybe Now. I read this one and the last one. So this was cool. This was a cool book. I gave it 3 stars because it was just okay, not great. But clearly, I ain't been learning my lesson because then I come back and read the sequels to these books. I think because they were just kind of easy reads, or not easy as in like small because it's a thick book, but it just kind of flowed. It was a good story. I read a lot of stories this year, and I'm usually into more like self-help and autobiography books, but I noticed that I read a lot of stories mixed in with my self-help. I didn't read as many self-help or as many like Black history books as I usually do, so that might be my focus because I still have some books on my shelf that I haven't read yet. Then I read, again, a book from that conference I got, 10 Words to Live By, another book by Jen Wilkins, the woman who wrote In His Image. And I gave this 5 stars. I remember out of the 3 books I got from that conference, or I read from that conference, I really, really liked this one the best. I feel like it really resonated with me and helped me reflect on my relationship with God. And I finished that book on October 12th. Then I read my favorite book of 2023. I gave it 5 stars, of course, and I finished that on October 25th. When I tell you I was reading, like I was on it. I read this book in like maybe 10 days or so. This one, if I recommend you any Colleen Hoover book, Too Late, It Ends With Us, and It Starts With Us. Those are my 3 favorite ones. But if this one is different than all of the other books that I've read by her, this is a really it's different than books I've read by her, but it's also different than books I've ever read or am interested in. Like, I'm not interested in mysterious and like criminal and all this stuff, but it was so many twists and turns. I was gasping. I was in a panic at different moments, and that anybody who knows me that knows I do not like to be like frantic or scared or anxious or anything like that. I don't like suspense, but this, Too Late, best book I read, best fiction book I read this year. And then I read Maybe Now, which was by Colleen Hoover, the sequel to Maybe Someday. I gave it 3 stars, finished it on November 12th. And then I read a book like that's going to help me in my work and my practice and also my job as a school counselor. 15-minute focus, brief counseling techniques that work, regulation and co-regulation. As you can see, I was in here making some notes in this book. I gave it 5 stars. I finished this book on November 26th. This was a good book. I think I just read it over like Thanksgiving break. Quick tips and strategies to help co-regulate and regulate myself as I'm helping students regulate themselves. And it kind of gave me a new perspective on like just patience and seeing where the kids are coming from and like really, really trying to get in there deep and realize that it's not personal. These kids are going through things that have nothing to do with me. They're just taking their actions out, acting out in a specific way. So that was a really good book that can help me in my professional life and personal. And then the last book I read, y'all, funny thing about this book, I've been reading this book all year. I want to say I started it in March. Then I just kept reading all these other books and never got back to it. I was like 100 pages in. I was like, I am going to read this book before the end of the year. The Body Keeps the Score. It's about brain, mind, and body and the healing of trauma. So kind of like a trauma book, but about also an informative book as me being a therapist. But it also was very like just trauma heavy. Like it was okay. I read it. Only reason I finished this book was because I said I'm going to finish this book this year. It wasn't like I was so eager to. But like I said, when I got back to the book, I probably started it in March, tried to read a few pages. I was like 100 pages in, so I started all the way over because I didn't start the book until December. And then I don't even know when I started. Let's see. I started this book 11 months ago. Oh, I think I started at the beginning of the year. And then I want to say, yeah, at the end of November. So probably it took me about a month to read this book. I was just so over it. And I gave it 2 stars because it was just like, I did all that for me to just hear a bunch of things about trauma. So, would not recommend. Like I said, I read it because I know about trauma and I said I was going to finish it. But it was a very climactic way to end my 2023 books. But I'm also reading Atomic Habits again. I read that before last year in 2022, I want to say. So I'm just refreshing myself on that before the end of the year. And that is my 2023 books in review. If you have any questions about any of the books or you want me to go into deeper detail about my review on them or what I thought about them, or if we just want to catch up about them, if you read one and you're like, ooh, let's discuss this, we can do that too. Like, comment, and subscribe. And hit the notification bell that's right next to the subscribe button so you're notified every time that I post a video. And you can make your comments about the books definitely in the comments. So see you guys later. Belated Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.